We'll start in a few minutes. Thank you everyone for joining.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining tonight's meeting. For the interest of time, because we are going to start our breakout rooms at 8:30 p.m. and we have two attendings and four total residents, including myself and Dr. Rasmussen, that are going to be having breakout rooms in our specialties. So I would like, if you haven't met her before, I'd like to introduce Dr. Janae Rasmussen. She is an orthopedic surgery resident. And she is so good at giving tips for medical school, for residency. She was my mentor throughout medical training as well. We both went to ATSU, and she is going to present tonight on how to excel in residency interviews and tips and tricks just across the board for any specialty for in-person and virtual interviews for residency.
Thank you so much, Kelly, for collaborating with me and for the very kind introduction. So, I'm currently a fourth year orthopedic surgery resident in Modesto, California, and I might have two of my attendings also joining for the orthopedic breakout room. We had a long day of surgery, so we'll see if they're able to join for that. So, the overall format for today is I'm going to start off with just going over some essential tips for success, common questions that you'll be asked in an interview. We'll go over some of the differences between virtual and in-person interviews, and then finally, we'll leave with breakout rooms. So, one of the first things that's so important is to prepare. I can't tell you how many students come into an interview and it's very clear that they don't know much about the program. And that lack of preparation obviously looks very negative on them, but it also makes the person have a lot less confidence in themselves because they haven't prepared. So, one thing that can be very helpful is to review who is interviewing you. You might be given a list ahead of time by the program coordinator. Sometimes you aren't necessarily given that information. If you aren't, you are more than welcome to certainly ask the program coordinator if you know which faculty will be there. And if so, look up whether or not any of them have had any recent publications. Maybe they have a specialty interest that they post online. Are they alumni of the program? That can certainly bring up some great questions if they are alumni and asking them, why did they stay at that program? Another thing that's important is to think about unique questions for the program. So many medical students will come into an interview and they'll say, so, what is a change that you foresee over the next 5 years? That question gets asked all the time. And from the programmed perspective, it's very vague and honestly kind of boring. It doesn't really show any sort of nuance. What's going to help you stand out is having very unique or specific questions. And we can go through some of those, particularly in the breakout rooms, with what are good examples. But in general, make sure you're not asking a question that you can easily look up online and make sure that the questions that you're asking are thoughtful. It's so important that you come in prepared. So whether or not you have these written down on a notebook or you have things printed out, make sure you have a long list of questions. And sometimes the best questions can come from looking at faculty or resident publications or other things that they do in their community that help them stand out. Make sure that you review your application. You need to know everything. It is all fair game. Even a random research paper where maybe you're the last author, it is absolutely fair game. I have seen many students get caught up in an interview where a faculty member asks them about a research paper, and the student is not able to articulate what the purpose of that paper was or what the findings were. In addition, think about what are your hobbies, any research projects, or other unique experiences. We'll talk about some other things throughout this presentation that will help you stand out, but make sure that you're thinking through what are some core experiences or traits that you have that are going to help you stand out amongst the pack. And if you have any sort of negative things about you, for example, maybe you didn't pass one of your board exams the first time, maybe you didn't get high honors or honors on like your surgery shelf or whatever field that you're considering. If you have a question that you really hope they don't ask, make sure you prepare how to answer that question. Because if you have something that is making you anxious going into the interview, something that you're like, oh my gosh, this is a red flag, or I hope that they don't ask me about it, be prepared to answer it in a professional way. And if it helps boost your confidence, if they had something that they saw in you that they were like, we would absolutely not rank this applicant based on their CV, they wouldn't invite you to an interview. You've already made it in the door. So make sure that anything that you perceive as a weakness or that you know objectively is a weakness, prepare to have a good, thoughtful, and professional explanation for it. And essential to you doing well is to practice. I can't tell you how many times I practiced by recording myself answer questions and rewatching it. As awkward as it is very important because it helps give you additional insight into, are you using your hands a lot? Are you doing things that are very distracting? How is your tone when you're talking? And all of that can give you a lot of helpful insights. Additionally, mock interviews can be very helpful. If you have mentors or other individuals that can help provide you guidance, they are wonderful. I'm currently in the middle of fellowship interviews, and one of my mentors, he did a mock interview with me, and it was very helpful because all the advice that I'm giving to you all here are all things that I still have to remind myself as I go into fellowship interviews. It is so important that you do not get overly confident and you remember to practice and to stay humble and to be prepared that you are going to be asked things or put into scenarios that you might feel uncomfortable with. And it is so important that you practice and prepare as much as possible. And one of the keys when you think about going to an interview is your goal is to articulate why you. What makes you unique? What are you going to contribute to that program? What are some adversities you've overcome to demonstrate that you're going to be an exceptional resident? That's going to demonstrate that you are going to be able to be resilient when things get challenging during residency. A helpful question to ask if you're kind of struggling to think, what does make me unique? Is think about your letter writers. What do you think they likely wrote about you? Are there personality traits that likely help you stand out amongst your peers? Are there life events that really stand out as things that maybe were a negative experience or something that was really positive that helped form who you are today? And you can also think about examples of who you want to emulate. Maybe there was an attending that you really admire. Throw in their name, especially if there's someone that maybe wrote you a letter of recommendation, and think about what are the attributes that they have that you want to demonstrate. At the end of the day, if you can't articulate what makes you unique from the hundreds, if not thousands of other applicants who are also motivated, hardworking, and have good scores, you're not going to be able to do well. This is your time to shine and to demonstrate why they should pick you. And so, the nerve-wracking question that most of you are likely going to encounter in some way is tell me about yourself. And this is typically one of the questions that gets your heart rate going the most. And one of the important things with this is you want to be concise and you want to be brief. A common thing that I see students do is they start to ramble and it becomes this very disjointed story, and you're trying to basically get them back on track. So this is something you want to practice. Consider it like a sales pitch. You only have a minute maximum, maybe a minute and a half to articulate who you are, why you want that specialty, why you want to be at that program, and demonstrate that excitement and gratitude for being there. So very importantly, introduce yourself. Give a little hint of your background. This is not your time to talk about, oh, I grew up in this state and then I traveled to this state. Get to the point. Figure out what are those key elements that are going to help you stand out and really rein them in on what are the key things. So, for example, if you have a leadership role that is super important to you, even if it's on your personal statement and all these other things, if it's something that you really want them to ask you more about, make sure that that's included in this brief sales pitch. This is your time to showcase to them, here are some of the elements that I am proud of and want to demonstrate. And importantly, you want to make it a conversation. Think about it from the interviewer's perspective. If you are just talking with someone and they come across as really uncomfortable and they're not prepared and they're kind of sitting there and they clearly don't seem to know what they want to talk about, you're probably going to start to feel kind of uncomfortable too. So it's really important that as you are going through interviews, no matter how nervous you get, try to focus on making it a conversation, making it feel more natural. If you come across as confident and you come across as someone who is easy to talk with, that is already going to help you so much more than just how you answer the question. So, importantly, rehearse, practice, but don't memorize. If you try to come up with a script of what exactly to say, if you start to fumble, that's when you'll likely start to really show that you're kind of scrambling in your head because you're forgetting your lines. This is not something that you're going to have memorized. Instead, think of outlines. Think of your top three stories that might answer an adversity. Think of top three stories that make you unique. And that way, if you start to get nervous and your brain is starting to have a little bit of like brain fog, you have these like really nice stories ready to go that you can kind of interchange without it feeling rehearsed. And that brings us to the important element of storytelling. As humans, we are naturally going to be more engaged if you start off with a good story. And so when you're trying to think about how you're going to answer a question, showing instead of telling is really important. So showing how you overcame adversity as opposed to saying, I overcame adversity. And think about those stories that are going to help them feel really engaged and make it feel like it is a great conversation. And with that, show interest and enthusiasm. I can't tell you how many medical students, they have an incredible story and they sit there and they talk to you kind of like this and they look really just kind of uncomfortable with themselves or they're kind of mumbling and you're wondering like, wait, what are you talking about? Enunciate, show confidence, sit and lean forward in your chair. All of that makes a huge difference. If you talk with a monotone voice like this, and it sounds kind of boring, it sounds like you're reading off a script. And if you think about it, they're probably not going to want to keep listening, no matter how amazing your story is. So it's really important that even if public speaking isn't in your natural forte, this is something that you practice because it absolutely can make a huge difference. And once again, keep your responses brief. No response should be more than 1 to 2 minutes. This is an environment where you are trying to communicate as many positive things as you can about yourself and answer thoughtful questions. But you also want to make sure that you leave enough time that you are able to get to more potential questions. If you start going past 2 minutes, even if you're telling the coolest story about how you summited Mount Everest, you're probably going to start losing some people's interest, especially when they're now on the ninth person that they're interviewing. They're starting to feel drained. Keep it light, keep it concise. And importantly, this ties into your body language. So notice things such as your hand placement. If you're sitting there and you're fidgeting with your hands, it's very distracting and it's something that they will continue to notice, even if they're kind of making eye contact with you. If you're someone that's struggling with fidgeting, what can be helpful is to start off with placing your hands underneath the table to start. Ideally, your hand should be resting on top of a table with open hands. There's a huge difference between having some hand gestures, showing that you're comfortable and relaxed as opposed to sitting there. I've seen so many students where they sit back and their hands are crossed or they're sitting like this. That conveys that they're closed off, that they're nervous. Even though you're feeling that way, it is so important that you fight the instinct and that you show that you are exuding confidence. So, with that, it's important that you think about having a good posture. So, if you're sitting back and you're comfortable in your chair and you're rocking back and forth, that honestly just looks unprofessional and it just shows that you look very nervous. Again, no matter how you are feeling, no matter how fast your heart is racing, do everything in your power to look controlled, to look poised, to take a breath before you answer a question. When you're making eye contact, even if only one person asked you a question, if you have a group of people, make sure you look around the room, making eye contact with them as you're answering. Again, you're trying to make it a conversation. You're trying to look relaxed so that they feel relaxed and they're going to feel way more likely to engage with you and feel that they're having a really good interview session with you. And at the end of the day, always remember to smile. This is something that I see a lot of students where they have incredible answers, but they look really uncomfortable. They look bored. They're talking about a passion in their life, and yet they look like they're upset about something. Take a breath. It doesn't mean you have to sit there and smile awkwardly like this, but it's really important that you're kind of having like that gentle smile. If you're responding to things, have a smile, have something that demonstrates that you are excited to be there. All of this that I'm saying for a lot of you that are not comfortable public speaking probably feels sufficiently awkward. Again, this is where practice comes in, and it's not something that is necessarily going to ever feel comfortable, but by doing these things, it will make your interview go better. And once again, this comes back to the point of it's not necessarily what you say, it's how you say it. You can have the best CV, but if you don't demonstrate confidence, excitement, and are able to concisely articulate why you, they're likely not going to be able to rank you as highly. And I've seen this scenario where we had incredible applicants, and those applicants got ranked lower because their interview went worse, despite auditioning, despite having incredible CVs. So don't undervalue yourself and the power that a good interview can have. So you're going to be asked a lot of questions, primarily things about, let's say you had a difficult scenario with a teammate and how did you overcome an adversity? And one of the helpful frameworks is to think about what's called the STAR method. A lot of you may have already heard of this before, but it's essentially a way that you can help articulate through a scenario. So for example, when it starts with describing the situation, paint the story. What was the conflict? Then think about what was the task? Was there something that had to be completed? Was there a certain deadline? What was the thing that ultimately led to an issue or made it interesting and worthy of talking about? Follow up with talking about what was the action? What was the thing that you did and the ultimate result? If you follow this format, it can help provide you some structure. And once again, we are creating outlines for stories, for experiences. We are not trying to memorize. So if you think about some of the most memorable patient interactions or things that you've overcome or important aspects of your CV and stories that you think demonstrate your perseverance, if you think about it in this framework, it can oftentimes help you articulate and come across as much more concise and also someone who is very thoughtful with their responses. And one of the most important things is to always remember you are being observed. Professionalism is key. It is not just how you show up on interview day. It is the emails with the program coordinators. It's how you interact with residents. Are you someone that has a public Instagram account? You can bet that some programs are certainly going to look at that, are certainly going to look at LinkedIn accounts. I know I've got notifications about people from fellowship programs looking at my LinkedIn account. All of that is so important that you think about how are you demonstrating yourself, not just on your interview day, but from every interaction. For example, I have seen students where they message me as a resident or the program coordinator saying, "Hey, first name." While that is something that you might do with someone you know, in the context of you trying to get into residency, always defer to the most professional greetings, defer to the most professional ways that you can address someone. And that brings us also to how you're going to dress for success. It's very important that you try to be as professional and neutral as possible. So, for example, you might love the color pink, but don't wear a bright hot pink suit to a residency interview. You could wear a muted pink, you could wear things that are a little bit more subdued, but your goal is not to stand out in the aesthetic. The goal is to stand out in what you're saying and the stories that you're conveying. So if you have really dangly jewelry or you wear your hair down, but it keeps coming in your face and you're constantly fidgeting with it, it's overall very distracting. So importantly, dress much more professional than you think you need to. And if you have like a social dinner the night before, a common question is, well, what should I wear? I would avoid things like jeans or anything that's casual. You don't need to wear a full suit unless advised by that program, but wear like a professional business outfit. Make sure you're doing something that demonstrates that you are being very professional. And with that, think about how you're going to send like a professional thank you email at the end of an interview. I would highly recommend if you are going to send an email, do not send a two-line email. Include some things about the interview day. Make sure that you make it personalized so it doesn't seem like you're just using a generic email. So these are some common questions. There is a very long list, and in the breakout rooms, we can likely go through some different questions for different specialties, but you absolutely want to make sure you are comfortable answering all of the ones listed on this screen. So, for example, what's an interesting case that you saw? What's a patient encounter that challenged you or an adversity that you have gone through? Why our program? That's super important that you can articulate that. What's your favorite research project and why? What are your career goals? Where do you see yourself in XYZ years? And very importantly, with a lot of these questions, is that you're trying to be honest at all times, but also don't pigeon yourself into a corner. So, a good example of this is let's say that you're applying to a community kind of orthopedic program. It's helpful in that context to maybe say that, I have a lot of background working in community service, working with underserved communities, but you don't want to pigeonhole yourself and say, well, I know for sure I only want to work in a community setting. Make sure you stay honest and genuine to yourself, but you're also not closing any doors. When I first started residency, I thought for sure I was going to be a community surgeon. And now I'm applying to pediatric ortho and hoping to possibly work on an academic center. So demonstrate this open-mindedness, demonstrate curiosity. Oh, I don't know what subspecialty I may be interested or what fellowship. I'm thinking maybe this, but I'm excited to see where my career takes me. End things on a positive note and don't eliminate things and try, make yourself seem like you're too sure of yourself. Demonstrate that curiosity. So, a few helpful tips for virtual versus in-person interviews. Virtual interviews, make sure you log on at least 15 minutes prior. When you have your camera, have it slightly above eye level. In general, if you have it right at eye level, sometimes it can make it look like you're looking up someone's nose. So have it slightly above eye level. Have good lighting. One of the most helpful things I invested in as a med student was a Ring camera off Amazon. I think it was like $40, and I use it still to this day for interviews, webinars, and it really helps with adding brightness. It can help with demonstrating expressions. It is not something that you want to skimp on. Make sure you have a clean and organized background. Sometimes people just want to have a blank white background if they have like a white wall. That's totally fine. But having a lot of distractions in the background can honestly take the focus off of you. If you can, place things such as maybe some textbooks or awards or other things in your background that maybe the interviewer might be able to notice and recognize. But at the end of the day, try to keep it simple. Don't have any clutter, don't have anything in the background that you aren't able to directly talk about if you were to be asked. And when you're talking in a virtual interview, it's important that you're looking at the camera. It's going to feel awkward, but if you look down at the screen, it doesn't look like you're making eye contact versus when you look at the camera, it looks like you are directly talking with someone. So it's again something you want to practice. And do not ever take recordings or screenshots during a virtual interview. Some programs will have you sign disclosures, but it is so important that you do not try to do this at any time. And some helpful tips for in-person interviews: create a checklist in advance, make sure that all your travel is lined up. I'll show you a screenshot later on of how I kind of organize my interview schedule. Arrive well in advance. So at least 20 to 30 minutes prior. Typically, I'll get to an interview in person like an hour prior, even if that means I sit in my car for 15 minutes and like meditate. The point is, you never know if like traffic or some other barrier is going to happen. Get there plenty early. Put your phone away. Even during breaks, do not go and look at your phone. Take that opportunity during breaks to go sit in a bathroom stall, take some deep breaths, or interact with other applicants. It can honestly look kind of unprofessional when you see a student and they're sitting back and they're just on their phone in between sessions. So do your best to put your phone away. Make sure that you're mindful about things like cologne, perfume as you are with your professional dress. If you can, attend social events. And once again, be mindful of interactions outside of the interview room and how important those are. One of my favorite quotes for those of you who have played sports have probably heard this many times is if you're on time, you're late. This comes to you responding to emails from a program coordinator, how you arrive to an interview or social events. Make sure you are always there early. You turn things in early. You communicate well in advance if you have any barriers or issues or questions. And then importantly is staying organized. I took out the list of programs and some of the other details, but this is one of the Google spreadsheets that I created for myself to help me organize my medical school interviews for residency. And then I use the same template that I have organized for my resident, or excuse me, for my fellowship interviews. And it really helped me stay on track for did I have flights booked, hotels, including the cost of things. And then I also had this notes area where I put specific notes about what questions I wanted to ask for every interview, and then also reflections from the interview itself. And with that, take detailed notes. You will notice that you're going to have so many different interviews that it might start to blend in and you might start to forget things that stood out. Write down your gut reactions. Write down things that stood out as really positive or negative. And one of the things that I did during my interviews is I created sort of a preliminary rank list where, as I was going through interviews, I basically just modified my list and kind of compared things in real time. That list wasn't ended up not being my final list. I made some changes when I did my final reflections, but it can really help you kind of sort through what are your priorities and what are things that stood out as a positive or negative. And with everything that I've shared here, one of the most important things to think about is, would I want to be on call with this person at 1 a.m.? When you reflect on how are you conveying yourself? How are you demonstrating your resilience, your communication, your professionalism, your team working skills? This is what the interviewer, the residents, the attendings, the program director are going to be thinking about. Is this someone who's reliable? Is this someone we can trust is going to learn the skills and be able to communicate appropriately with challenging scenarios? So you answering why do you want to be at that program? That all comes into play and really helps them assess, is this the right fit for this program? And you have the power in how you communicate, in how you are able to articulate who you are, in being able to help them shift their perception of if you are the right candidate. So thank you so much for listening to this opening presentation. We are going to be going into breakout rooms. We have a lot of different specialties here. I think for timing wise, we're going to be going to breakout rooms in a few minutes. If there's any questions, I'm happy to answer them now. And if not, you can save them for your breakout rooms. Through all of this, I know I threw a lot at you, but the main takeaways is you have to be able to articulate why you are unique. You need to practice, and you need to be able to articulate how you are going to be able to effectively contribute to that program and be able to demonstrate great communication skills and professionalism. I hope all of you don't let the nerves get too much. I still get nervous for fellowship interviews. You're going to do awesome, but it does take practice and diligence.